Superclaims presents A Day in the Life of Ruth Justine, Part 1. No, Mr. Brandt, you cannot claim a hole punched through 5 floors as a pre-existing infrastructure flaw. Ruth suppressed a groan and instinctively began steepling her hands. She'd read that this was often considered a sign of confidence, but made a note to watch for this behavior. She saw no reason to leave a flaw unchecked. As her client fumbled through his next argument, she reviewed his file. Regine Brandt, a B-class hero with the working name Steel Striker, was a seasoned hero working the Sacramento area when he was called in to defuse a bomb threat. Evacuation of the building moving slowly, he chose to create an opening in the ceiling and hurl the bomb through. A reckless plan which endangered far more lives than if he'd hurled it into the basement where less civilians were, but ultimately considered a successful choice. Ruth was sure she could easily turn reckless endangerment into collateral damage with intent to protect lives if he would just make the correct argument. Look, I'm just saying, there is no way a proper building would become unstable if... Are you even listening to me? Mr. Brandt raised an eyebrow. Ruth always had found it odd that clients expected to be taken seriously while wearing their costumes, but she'd grown accustomed to it over the years. Yes, Mr. Brandt. However, the fact remains that the building was confirmed as being up to code by Morden Insurance just a few months ago. Ruth paused for a moment before continuing. And yes, it's your insurance. I assure you this pedantry is mandatory for all Morden Insurance representatives to state at least once. Returning to your case, you seem to have a history of incidents of this nature, which would suggest a history of rash action with good intentions. Ruth stressed the final words of this, making a show of pushing forward other claims where Regine had gotten off with goodwill exceptions. The hero didn't even bother looking at the files. Freaking pencil pushers. Yeah, I've had to save lives in the past. It's kind of my job. But this time, the building wasn't up to code. Ruth gave a curt nod and noted his arguments. She knew he'd be back in a week's time, declined, and the bill passed on to Mr. Brandt. Very well, Steel Striker. I'll note your observations for the case. Let's discuss what your current plan will and won't cover now that your testimony has been taken. Ruth Justine put Regine Brandt's file in her outgoing basket and stared at the calendar. 9 years, 4 months, 23 days. In that time, she had worked her way up from receptionist to the top B-class agent of the San Francisco Morden Insurance office. It was June 17th, 1995. And she despised the June picture. A glamorous shot of the Los Angeles Morden Insurance building, it always reminded her that the A-class agents were only a 6-hour drive away. Her 37th birthday would mark 9 years and 5 months. A stray hair caught Ruth's eye. Heroes always brought dust, soot, and lint in with them, and she'd never found a good method for keeping it off her otherwise meticulously maintained suits for long. She ran a lint roller along herself, careful to keep the sharp shoulder pads firm and collar on her shirt crisp. Ruth reasoned that her coworkers may be content with business casual, but they had also been graced with slim white faces and plump lips. She felt more comfortable in professional attire anyway. The office itself seemed clean of debris, surprising given Steel Striker's case. Not that there were many places for dirt and soot to hide. Ruth's layout was designed to work with the San Francisco office's efficient and cozy floor space. 3 chairs and a desk, all approved by the Society of Super-Powered Individuals to withstand up to the full force of an A-rank strike. She'd also brought in her own lamp and kept the mandatory calendar on the wall by the door, next to the clock and multiple honors she'd received for exemplary work from Morden Insurance. Ruth hated the building. Not that she could ever put a finger on why. It was a perfectly serviceable office in good repair and one of the most fortified buildings in the city. The aesthetics were fine as well, the usual Morden grays and whites, plus it had good facilities, including a gym and a massage room. Ruth's issues stemmed from what it wasn't, and the primary facet that this building lacked was the Los Angeles location. The click of the intercom interrupted her wandering thoughts. "Ruth, your 12:30 is here. You ready for her?" Ruth pulled out the next file and replied, "Give me 5 minutes, then send her in." Her next client was Suzanne Herons, a nature empath with some limited psychokinetic and manipulative abilities within the genus of Rosaceae. After looking up a few terms in the dictionary she kept in the second drawer, Ruth came to the conclusion that this meant Miss Herons, alias Sweet Rose, was able to control roses and their root systems. Sweet Rose had a documented history of keeping a few roses and seed packets on her at any given time to overcome what would be a D-class power in anyone else's hands. Evidently, she'd been involved in the capture and detainment of a villain who'd happened to interrupt Sweet Rose's trail maintenance work, causing an allergic reaction and subsequent pressing of charges. Ruth spent a few minutes flipping through Suzanne's history, flipping the folder closed as her client entered the office. Tall with flowing red hair, it was easy to see why Sweet Rose was a media darling the few times she'd worked in the city. Her outfit struck Ruth as faux modest. A well-fitted suit in forest green with rose gold trim and a minimalist face mask. Sweet Rose's costume was akin to an office worker's apparel, save for the short sleeves and ample amount of pockets for various seeds and roses. Ruth found herself most impressed with the pockets. She'd always wished she could work them into her own outfit. Suzanne extended a hand and said, "Suzanne Herons, alias Sweet Rose. It's nice to meet you." Ruth gave a polite handshake and said, "It's always a pleasure to meet a new client, Miss Herons. Ruth Justine, Senior Agent. Have a seat." Ruth was surprised to find a rose curled around her hand as she withdrew from the handshake, setting it on the desk as the two settled into their chairs. After routine security checks and verification of identities, Suzanne confirmed what Ruth had already known. She had been doing volunteer work with maintaining the trails around San Francisco, a combination of publicity and research into her own abilities. She maintained a patch of flowers that crossbred with roses, studying which she could control and which she could not, and saw this as a prime opportunity for maintaining her brand while doing necessary work for the Society of Superpowered Individuals. She continued that during this time she heard sounds of distress and, being a hero, responded as she deemed appropriate after identifying that a known villain was moving in her direction. She used the root system of her rose patch to entangle the villain, a young man who called himself Chiller. Both she and Morden Insurance were currently unsure of the nature of his abilities, as he went into shock immediately after being restrained. Suzanne released him and administered emergency treatment upon identifying his condition and saved his life, a fact corroborated by multiple eyewitnesses. Ruth nodded along as Miss Herons shared her report of the situation and, as she reached the end of her explanation, said, "Well, your story lines up with the accounts we received. You acted appropriately, maintained a good face for the SSPI and Morden Insurance, and went beyond the call of duty. All we need to do in regards to Chill's weak lawsuit is invoke Good Samaritan laws and note that you acted quickly." Ruth began putting away the few files she'd pulled out when Suzanne said, "Actually, I might have a different idea. We keep the Good Samaritan defense, but maybe we try a different angle. Do you have the file for the hero who was assigned to this case by the SSPI?" Ruth raised an eyebrow, but dug through her files and pulled out the original hero's folder. "I do, but in compliance with SSPI guidelines, I can only discuss him by his working name. Rodeo King, the lasso hero, was the hero chosen by the SSPI for this case." Suzanne sighed. "I thought so. I've worked with the kid before. He's got a good style, and he usually knows what he's doing. He fits snugly into the B class. He doesn't deserve to have a hit on his record. Was he given any information on this chiller guy's abilities? Ruth returned a blank stare.
By federal law, we cannot disclose confidential orders and discussions between SSPI operatives and their respective heroes without a court order.
Suzanne moved as if to interject something, but Ruth continued.
However, as it is relevant to your case, what I can inform you of is that Chiller does not currently have a listed power or private identity on record.
The heroine paused for a moment, then said, I want to pin the blame on the SSPI, not Rodeo King. They let him down. I think that much is clear. Ruth steepled her hands.
Miss Herons, my job as a Morden Insurance representative is to remind you that we are your insurance. And the best path out of this unpleasantness is to highlight your compliance with SSPI guidelines, note your impulse to help a villain from a life-threatening situation, and get you out of this situation not just with a clean record, but good publicity. My recommendation, to spare so many words, is to use the Good Samaritan laws and the stated goal of the SSPI to help all people in danger, to both promote your own brand and rise further as a hero.
Sweet Rose gave a curt laugh. I thought your job was to find the truth of the situation, insurance agent. I don't need short-term glory. I'll get other chances. I want to prevent something like this from happening again. And if you won't help me, I'll do it myself. Thanks for your time, Ruth. The hero rose and walked out of the office without another word. After a moment of sitting and thinking, Ruth hit the intercom and let her secretary know she'd be taking lunch. Morden Insurance's facilities had always been the one thing Ruth could find few issues with. The exercise room was well stocked and maintained, the Zen garden was genuinely beautiful, and even their cafeteria was well stocked and exquisitely catered. It helped that local companies were eager to earn a moment's consideration with any insurance claims that may involve them, no doubt about that. But too often ignored were the many civilian-grade powers that proved instrumental in the kitchen. Literal super tasters and keen eyes meant that no matter the dish, an agent could be assured that it'd be one of the finest they'd ever had. It was a shame the 24/7 cycle of Morden Insurance updates on loop in the dining area ruined it for Ruth. Ruth found herself sitting next to Ralph, a C-rank agent, her usual meal of a chicken salad and water in front of her, and her favorite conversation starter coming as naturally as breath.
If I have to hear him give one more super claim update.
Ralph groaned at this, his usual response. Yeah, Ruth, I know. We all know. Jimmy Backer is the scourge of Morden Insurance, the bane of customer service, and the worst thing to happen to you personally since the time your desk was lit on fire. Though I hear he's thinking of retiring from customer outreach. Might be a fresh new face giving us super claims in '96. Ruth couldn't help but grin. He knew her so well.
Nothing against him, but
he's so monotone despite being so emotional, right? Ralph stared at Ruth, taking a deliberate bite of pizza. Ruth sighed, looking away. She never could stand to watch someone eat.
I suppose we can skip that conversation for today. How about a hypothetical situation?
Ralph smirked at this. Oh, complaining about clients for once? Not that you are complaining about a client, this is purely hypothetical. So, what ridiculous nonsense did John Doe want that was so bad the honor student of Morden Insurance herself needs to vent? Ruth set aside her salad.
So suppose a client wanted to take the SSPI to task for an oversight during a job.
Ralph returned to his meal. Okay, this is actually hypothetical. Look, everyone knows there's no point in going after the SSPI. At best, you're pissing on your boss's shoes, and at worst, you're getting a few heroes and agents blacklisted for no reason. Ruth shook her head.
I disagree. There's at least one benefit from escalating an issue, ensuring there's a paper trail when the SSPI refuse procedures.
Ralph pointed his crust at Ruth and said, "Yeah, a paper trail with your name along with your client. You ever wanted a promotion, that cat is skinned and out of the bag the second you sound that bell." Ruth couldn't help but chuckle at this.
"You've outdone yourself with that turn of phrase. Regardless, if we're talking about promotion, it's agents who go above and beyond that get promoted."
Ralph blew a raspberry at this, tossing his pizza crust lazily towards the nearest trash can. "Oh, please, that's what they say during reviews. Above and beyond is a sneaky way of saying you're willing to screw the client to save Morden a buck. Keep your head down, your expenditures lower, and you'll be enjoying your cushy Los Angeles office in no time." Ruth nodded along absently and said,
"Well, thank you for the feedback. You're surprisingly helpful with things like this."
Ralph stood and said, "No problemo. We should do more hypothetical stuff like this. Way better than spending lunch talking about Morden's propaganda. See you around, Ruth." Ruth dwelt on the question a few moments longer, absently picking at her salad. She shuddered as she heard Jimmy Becker say, "It's Morden Insurance. It's your insurance." She picked up Ralph's discarded crust and threw it away on her way back to the office. Upon returning to her office, Ruth hit the intercom.
"Dave, give me 20 minutes before my next meeting. I need to call back Miss Herons."
Thank you so much for listening. It means a lot that you take the time out of your day for this podcast. I'm Nick, the voice, writer, and editor of this podcast. But I am always grateful to my co-writers who help with the editing and iteration process, Tom and Michaela. Seriously, thank you both. These short stories are not planned to replace the format of the show, but they will supplement it. Daniel Ward's perspective can be narrow at times and hard to escape, but with these short stories they give me more room to explore the heroes and other agencies of superclaims. I plan to release these as every third episode, with Daniel's sections becoming more focused on a specific topic or acting as an essay of sorts. If you're supporting me on Patreon, which is patreon.com/Morden Insurance, MORDEN, then you'll know that I recently updated the pay tiers to allow early access to the next short story. Just $5 for the full audio version, or $2 for the written copy if you aren't fond of my reading voice. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you with the next one.